I'd like to call to order the Wednesday, July 17th, 2019 regular meeting of the Airport Advisory Board. I'd like to begin the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance and invite everyone to join us. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Please be seated. Alondra, would you conduct a roll call, please?
Shannon Stebbins.
Here.
Louis Worthy. Dave McNary. Robbie Willis. Brian Schultz.
Present.
Mark Zeef.
Here.
Shannon Hicks. Here. Ed Weber.
Here.
Raleigh Ballas.
Here.
Jim Dolan.
Here.
Damon Anderson.
Here.
There is a quorum.
Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome our mayor joining us as well this evening. Before I begin the open call to the public, just like an administrative announcement, Mr. Anderson has a new staff member. Would you like to introduce her, please?
You bet. We'd like to introduce Cindy Herzog to the staff with us. She's doing great, and hope everybody can give her a good warm welcome. She's going to be the one that most people are talking to out there, and she'll be dunning everybody up for their insurance, and try to be nice. And yeah, welcome.
Welcome. Thank you. I now have the open call to the public. I'm going to read this paragraph to comply with the Arizona Open Meeting Law. It says, we will now have an open call to the public for citizens wishing to address the board on issues within the jurisdiction of the board. Your comments must be limited to 5 minutes or less. If you wish to address an item already on today's agenda, you should wait until that item is announced for a public hearing. At the conclusion of the open call to the public, individual members of the board may respond to criticisms made by those who address the board, may ask staff to review a matter, or may ask that a matter be placed on future agenda. However, board members cannot discuss or take legal actions on matters not already on the agenda. So with that paragraph in mind, do we have anyone here that would like to address the board? Seeing none, we'll close the open call to the public. The next item is approval of the May 15th, 2019 meeting minutes. Does anyone have any additions or corrections? I would entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve the minutes.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Without objection, the minutes are approved. Next is communications announcements, airport supervisor's report, and that's Damon Anderson. Damon?
Very good. We actually have another bit of a change in staff going on with just the city in itself. We have Greg Frosley is now the director of public works as well, so he's going to be involved in a lot of the things we do. One thing I know has been on everybody's mind was the recorder. We actually got the recorder in. It's been recording good and saving lots of data, so that's up and running as well. We've got a little bit of the hot fueling update. I don't know if everybody saw that it was introduced into council the other day. It all passed through pretty unanimously. It'll go for adoption on I believe the 23rd of July as well, and then 30 days from that, if it goes through that, it'll all be a done deal with that. We've got the grant offer has come for our taxiway alpha design, which is good. All of that negotiations and everything we did went through well, and so we've got that grant offer, and we're planning on sending it back and moving forward with that as well. And everything's on time. We've got plenty of time left to make sure it all goes through. We're going to talk about, we have another PAC meeting coming up. And it's dealing with the Kaufman and Associates. We're working on them, and the phase that we're going to be working on right now, and I've been in contact with them, is doing the alternatives phase. I'm not sure if everybody's familiar with that, but that's where you look over all the different ideas of the airport and different developments that you can do, and we'll run through them all and see what's best, and kind of go with that to put on the master plan. And gate, I'm not sure if anybody's seen Gate 5 over by Hangar 24. It's it's just pretty much broke. Paul's been out there trying to repair it. Seems like every day it's just continuously breaking. We did get that approval in the budget to start with the new gate project to move that back and get all that going. So Paul Blazer, he's working on that for us right now. Hopefully that'll be getting going, within the next 3-4 weeks we'll have that going. But until then, and if you see anybody going through out there, it's just best to tell them to go on down to the cargo gate and use that one. And lastly, one thing that's happened at the airport that's it's going to be a big change was that Havasu Air Center through AvFuel has got awarded a military contract for fueling, and so that's a good thing for the airport. It's definitely probably going to bring in a lot more traffic at that, and hope everything will go smooth with that. And that's one thing that's really kind of kicked this, the other item on the agenda for the designated military parking. We've all known that we've kind of needed that, and there's no better time to get that going other than now, especially with having the more traffic coming in like it is. And it's about all I've got on that right there. We've been going through the waiting list. I know a lot of people hear about that, and I kept expecting when I call through, I was thinking some of these people that's been on there since '05 and earlier that they might take off, but lo and behold, I was only able to scratch 3 names off the list when I went through it, but I added 4 back to it at that. So it's we still have a good solid waiting list of 30 people for standard hangars, things like that. Then that's about all I've got.
The PAC meeting that you spoke of, that's the master plan, the public master plan briefing meeting. So the master plan committee will meet earlier in the afternoon, and then there will be a public presentation at the airport. Is that correct?
Correct.
Date and time?
It's correct. It's the planning advisory committee will meet here, I believe, at 1:30, and we'll discuss all those things. And then later that evening, I believe it's 5:30, in the airport terminal, we'll have the public workshop, and everybody's welcome to come.
And the date for that?
August 20th.
Any questions or comments?
How long a period of time does the recorder retain information? And how long will that information be retained by the airport?
When the guy that installed it, he said it can save up to 2 years worth of data on there. So what we're kind of planning on doing is every 6 months or so, throwing a thumb drive in, downloading all that stuff, clearing it off, and then going again. And we probably keep those records around for at least 5 years. It's kind of the standard for the aviation.
Any other questions? Mr. Z?
Yes, I'd like to know if you feel comfortable that there's enough adequate space for the new fueling operation that's going to go on, especially with the expected business, the growth. You think it'll keep everybody happy through the winter, and you feel like there's enough space to work with all the extra
Sure.
action?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, like I say, this one apron that we're talking about doing, it's not really being utilized for all that much. And it's going to kind of be a trial run at that, just kind of see how it all happens. Because really the only thing we're having to put out is, changing some paint on the asphalt. And then we can still go ahead and use some of those other tie downs that we've been using, currently as overflow in case we do have a lot come in at one time.
Anyone else? Next item is a public hearing. It's a presentation regarding designating military parking areas. This was requested by Mr. Anderson. I'll turn it over to him again.
Yeah, if everybody's looked at the layout, it's kind of just a rough sketch of what we got. I'd started out wanting to do this as putting helicopter parking down, but the more I start thinking about it, it's military. We get more King Airs and things like that, all different kinds of aircraft. So I've looked at a few of the military bases around in the area, Nullis and down in Luke, and kind of look at their layout plan. I've also got a contact with a man down at Mill Air out of Yuma that's going to come in and help kind of look over these plans as well and show, see if there's anything that we're missing as, when it comes to safety, distance separations, things like that. And so obvious when you see here, it's not helicopter pads, and these marks that you have, this is 100-foot separation where we're looking at least making sure that we have separation for the V-22s that come in. That's normally the biggest, area that's needed. And most of the time we're going to have somebody in there marshaling them at that. So if there's, need to cut it short, do what have you. Like I say, I feel like this will probably work out pretty good, and it's more or less just a trial run to kind of see how it goes. And
This is the same area that we talked about 3 or 4 months ago when we first brought up designated military parking in this board. Is that correct?
I believe so. I believe so. And I mean, one reason I kind of want to use this is because we do have the terminal there and we've got the facilities for the bathrooms and things like that, because they're going to need that. And it's, you know, and that's also something we're going to try to look into doing, is doing a little bit of a remodel in the terminal to accommodate some of those guys, give them some places to lounge and some privacy at that. Maybe even create some kind of a flight planning room at that. But that's a little later down the road. But there's a lot of things that are involved in this. I mean, I say it's just paint. I mean, we'll have to work on getting the access into the terminal 24 hours a day, because we're not, you know, staffed there all the time. So there's a few logistics items like that that need to be addressed, but shouldn't be anything we can't work through, and it just needs to be done.
So we're not talking about prohibiting civilian aircraft from using these parking spaces when the military is not parking them.
That's I'm leery on that. I'm still working on that to find out if that would create conflicts, and that's one thing I want to talk to this man down at Mill Air and see what his thoughts are on that, whether or not you know, that would be okay to do. It just definitely wouldn't want to jeopardize any of the safety that's going on. That will be where all the hot fueling will happen, and not totally sure about that. I mean, we'll just have to see. I'm not sure exactly how that would go, to be honest.
The requirement that we have from the FAA is to provide parking for the military, not separate parking, but to provide them someplace to park on the airfield.
Sure.
So we're meeting our obligations for certain with the FAA.
Right. Right.
Any other questions, comments?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely, and that's one thing I wanted to bring it up, was get a good fresh pair of eyes on this, and hope, you know, see if anybody has noticed any other thing.
I mean, I think it looks really good. I think getting the help from Yuma is really smart. Somebody that's got a lot of experience. But just on that last comment of mixing the civilian, I mean, with the V-22, with what they put out, the helicopters, I don't think it should be, they just don't mix. We have enough ramp space right now, unless something changed. I'm just afraid of somebody's plane getting damaged, and then you get to a liability point of who's responsible, and we all know the military self-insures. It's tax dollars.
Sure.
So I think if there's a way that we can keep it, my 2 cents would be to try and keep that in its own area, just for the sheer fact of damage, not space.
Sure.
You know, we did make a commitment to a helicopter operator from Alaska that he could use some of that space next winter and to set up his operation there.
I think that would work. Aren't they gonna? You showed me they're gonna be kind of pushed back, and I was at FISDO last week, and speaking of them, just to bring it up, they were meeting while I was down there on their 135 certificate.
Oh, nice.
So that's progressing.
Very good. Yeah, and that's one thing we are definitely trying to look at, is where they could go. We've actually even thought about over on the left side of the drawing is where we have the fence, and there's actually a nice little walkway that gets you across right there. And we thought if nothing else, they could go ahead and park on out there on the end of that row where it's at, and just walk the people out of the terminal, go across the gate, and get out there to their helicopter.
That should work.
Yeah, and if nothing else, maybe all the way over here at the other end, kind of where that, somewhat where that large shade port is, you know, when you can see, and that would kind of be outside that designated area as well.
Shannon, the only thing I would think with that helicopter operator to think of that I don't know if it's been brought up, is Taxiway Charlie with the ultralights or whatever we want to use. That helicopter pattern, from what I remember, they were showing that they were going to follow that same pattern. So I don't know if that would end up being an issue or not.
Then that would work definitely for them parking down by that large shade port at that, and that's one of the factors we're trying to take into play.
Yeah, the reality is that we're not going to have daily influx of military aircraft. At certain times, it's going to be heavy when they're when they're working on an exercise.
Mm-hmm.
But on a routine basis, I don't think you're going to have it full. And for those other times, then we're probably going to park those military aircraft, some of them on Taxiway Charlie, to have a place to park them. When we get 25 helicopters in at one time, we don't have any other choice. So I think we have to be flexible about where they park.
Sure. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I totally agree. It's not likely that there's going to be a huge influx of them every day. Like you say, it'll just be on a few rare occasions that you get, you know, a dozen or more of them at a time. And like you say, we've definitely got the 2 different areas set aside for overflow down on Charlie, or on top of the large tie downs that are out front by Bravo.
And we've had two C-130s simultaneously on that ramp before, when the Canadians were here.
Will we get advance notice, I guess, if they're coming? It's all pre-planned, I would assume.
Most of the time it is. I mean, there's a few times that, some of them show up, but most of the time they let you know they're coming.
From the military standpoint, there's a couple of things. As an ex-military pilot for many years, I can tell you that if you're just flying a cross-country flight or you have a mission and it's a 1 or 2 aircraft thing, they're not going to call ahead. They're just going to plan their fuel stops based on who has contract fuel, who takes the into-plane fuel card. Where you will get normally advance notices if they plan to bring several aircraft in at one time, then their operations folks will call whoever the contract holder is, and the heads up will come through the contract holder. It won't come directly to the airport supervisor, but without a doubt, the contract holder the next call will be the airport supervisor to start getting some help to take care of them.
Yeah, I've let Cindy know she's probably going to have an influx, a lot more to do over there when those guys start coming through, lots of questions coming from them. And then that's also, we'll have it on the AWAS as well. I'll try to keep it as brief as I can because I know how people don't like to listen through all that when they're waiting to hear the altimeter again. But that's, and like I say, a little bit of signage going up around to give them the access to the phones, who they need to call for the DLA fuel and things like that.
This is a public hearing. I'd like to open it up for anyone from the public in the audience that would like to make a comment. Saying none, we'll close the public hearing. Are there any other comments?
Question. The square area on this drawing, is that in front of the old Arabic Shreveport?
Yes, sir.
Is it a possibility that spot right there could be used for the tour helicopter?
That's exactly where I was thinking that would be.
Yeah.
Right.
There'd be shade there for people standing out and waiting for the
Sure.
next ride.
No, I totally agree. That was definitely, and that would work a lot well, would work very well when it comes to that pattern that the ultralights are doing on Charlie as well.
Yeah, I think some of this is going to have to be subject to working with that operator. I can tell you that's not what he had in mind when he talked to us before.
Yeah.
At all.
Yeah, he actually was going to be down in that little, corner right here, be just right.
Which might work just fine.
Yeah, depending on if it's that designated. And maybe we can even work out a thing with him, that they can go through there. He may have a little bit of a waiver to go through, but I don't think it's going to be a big deal to get him on the other side of the fence, just right there. That's not that far to walk, and I'm sure they'll come up with a golf cart, something to that effect, where they can shuttle the people around, to the.
Any other comments or questions?
Yes, Chairman. I was just wondering if, when you get overwhelmed on a military day, if the FBO in charge is required to let the supervisor know that, hey, we've got extra planes coming in, or is it at their disclosure whether or not they want to share that information? It could get tricky. Maybe we could think about implementing a plan to where, hey, you have to share that information when they're coming in with the supervisors to let Cindy know. Just some ideas.
As of right now, they're not, letting
The
me know.
airport,
But go ahead.
the airport sponsor, that would be overstepping our bounds. I think that would be getting into a contractual obligations between the contractor and the military. And the airport doesn't really have to be involved for a military airplane to land and for Havasu Air Center to fill it up with fuel. It's a normal everyday occurrence. I would think that obviously if there's going to be 12, a dozen, 20 aircraft coming, then Havasu Air Center would be overwhelmed, in my estimation, with trying to take care of them all. They're probably going to need some help from the supervisor of the airport and the staff. And I'm sure that they would
We'd be glad to help. Sure.
be talking to them. I'm not sure that this is something that the airport sponsor can get involved in to make it a requirement.
Okay, I just was concerned, a lot of visitors in the winter use the airport, a lot of civilians and stuff, and you wouldn't want to have them having a program that's overwhelming the airport. And, a friendly courtesy call or something like that would be nice from the FBO, considering do they own or are they leasing city property?
The FBOs, they have a land lease up, where they're
So
established.
one hand
again.
washes the other, in my opinion. His courtesy call would be nice, since we're being nice to you, even though you have no obligations to report the military coming in and excessive aircraft landings. It'd be nice to know, just to prevent a swale of calls that
Sure.
might come in when something like that happens, to
Sure.
let the civilians know. Because a lot of them do their own programs out there, washing their planes, doing different stuff, and, well, how come we didn't know about it? I'm just trying to prevent something like that happening in
Sure.
the future.
And I'll say Dante, the Marinellis are very good about giving me a heads up on some of those things when they come through. That's they're already pretty much doing good courtesies.
It only behooves them to do so, to get
Right.
the help. But I want to just reiterate that the military landing and getting fuel is a normal, everyday operation. The only thing that's changed is that instead of using the end-to-plane card that the military has, they're going to use their contract fuel card. And they're going to get a set price and set standards and all that comes along with that contract. As far as us, the airport sponsor, there's no change. The difference is now there's one provider providing them fuel instead of two providers providing them fuel. That's the only change. If I mischaracterize that, please speak
No,
up.
that's my understanding as well. You're right on.
If we know of a large group of military coming in and operating out of the airport, would it be advisable to make an AWAS announcement about that traffic?
Sure. Yeah, that's an easy thing to do, and it's very good idea for sure.
It's probably not logical to make an announcement for one or two
Right. But
helicopters, but if there's mass helicopters coming in and going out.
sure, I agree.
I know you already closed the questions. Can I just address some of your questions real fast, or is it that fast?
Can I reopen the public hearing? Without objection, I'm going to reopen the public hearing.
Yeah.
Please state your name and
Be sure to
for
hit
the
the mic.
record.
No, the button right here.
There we go. Dante, Havasu, our center. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, a lot of great questions and a lot of good feedback. A lot of stuff is already going on behind the scenes. Like Shannon said, this isn't any really different from anything that has been happening over the past 10 years. Just from an operational standpoint, we're looking at it from there probably will be an increase in activity. This contract basically opens it up to where before we were kind of limited to aircraft that needed to land in Havasu. Okay, now with contract fuel, now that people that want to come to Havasu on just a planned routine stop can, that are not just limited. Obviously most of what we see right now are rotorcraft. So they're range limited, which means that they can only land certain points, which means that Havasu on their way from point A to point B is a logical stop where they use a government air card, basically a credit card. Okay, so now the government contract basically opens it up where it allows anyone to then stop because they've got a negotiated rate, which they say, okay, look, we're not going to get gouged because we're not subject to just any rate off the street, which means that now anyone can land their C-130s fixed, a lot more fixed wing. It'll basically open it up to if they want to. Not that they have to, but if they want to. And there's really only about 8 airports around Arizona that actually have government contract fuel. So we're really excited. It's a nice thing. It's a really good thing. We've been pushing for it for a lot of years now, and it's definitely justified with the military traffic that we have. The reason that we've approached the city for a designated space, one, we see that there's plenty of room out there right now that's not being utilized. So from a standpoint of just needing some dedicated space, we don't think it's going to infringe on anyone at this point. And two, especially right off the bat, from a safety concern and from just an operational concern, we like the fact that we have a designated area that is not going to be mixed with GA because of the fact that if we're doing hot fuel operations or other things right now, at this point in our operation, we've basically been trying to keep everything either on our facility or on the north ramp. Okay, and now that we're on the south ramp, it's important to us to have kind of a designated area to operate in that's not going to infringe, but also is going to give us a little safety blanket as well as far as operations to make sure that we don't all of a sudden have 172s or this kind of stuff taxing by V-22s as the rotors are turning, which Unfortunately, over the last couple of years, that's happened more than I would like, and it's because of our proximity of where we were trying to park these in the past. So for us, it's a real benefit. I mean, it's nice that we have already some other operations that we can piggyback on, such as the bathrooms and everything else, because obviously we have a nice terminal, but it's 8,000 feet in the wrong direction. So it's nice to have a parking area with some bathrooms and some other facilities to facilitate these guys. And yeah, while Shannon is correct, it's required only to basically have a place to land. The operations that we see are successful, and we do see this as a partnership with the city to bring in more revenue. Just obviously every gallon that's pumped, the city's getting a piece of that. And so from our standpoint, the better we can make this and the safer we can make this, the more people will want to stop in Havasu. There's a couple of airports in our backyard that do a really good job of catering to hot fueling or just military tech stops in general, Imperial being one of them. That's 120 nautical miles away from us, and that's all they do all day long is that stuff. And they've built a little tiny airport that is now just a gas station for the military, basically for the guys out of Camp Pendleton, and they do a great job. And so that's one of the things that we're looking at, is trying to build this over the next couple of years to actually do that. And so yeah, part of it is not asking us from a standpoint to say, here, we want to carve out a little piece, but we do want to make it where we can absolutely be able to say, look, radio traffic, and be able to park them in 1, 2, and 3 positions and not have to worry that it's going to interfere if we're not always there to marshal them directly right off, because it is, again, on the other side of the field from our operations. So even like you guys said, we don't always get heads up. I mean, and the heads up may be, hey, we're on a 5-mile final. Well, to get 8,000 feet down the other side of the runway with a fuel truck or a marshaller in that case, probably not. I mean, to be honest with you, that's why we're going to, initially be able to set up with the city, with ASOS and all the rest, to kind of have a little bit of a guidance there. So until we kind of set up a routine, because most of the guys that we have ongoing basis know the routine. They know where to go. They've been here before. They know where to park. And so it'll take a while to reestablish that. But once we reestablish it, it should be normal practice from there. I mean, to your point, I mean, obviously, yeah, we're not LAX right now, but even today on a normal Wednesday afternoon, still had 7, 8 military operations today, on a 117 degree day in the middle of summer. So yeah, I mean, if we do our job right and we make sure that we do it safely and make sure that they feel secure, then I think it'll keep building. So if there's any other questions I can address, but I think, as I said, it's a good thing. We're really happy. I just want to make sure that we do it safely. Cool. Thank you.
I'd like to just reinforce one point, and that is that this board is on record of recommending a designated military parking area several months ago before any of this came about. So this is not something that the sponsor is providing to Havasu Air Center. This is something that we, the sponsor, are providing to our military customers, and for safety enhancement, to keep them separate from general aviation aircraft. So I think it's important to make that point. We aren't subsidizing Havasu Air Center. We're accommodating the military, and they happen to have the contract.
I agree.
That was kind of going to be my next thing, because it was kind of alluding to like a restricted area that was owned by something other than the city. This is still going to be part of the city airport, and it is public.
Correct.
Unless the military is there, then of course, yeah, everybody, of course, pilots should know to exercise caution and park in the proper areas that are more appropriate. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah, I would echo that sentiment. As you know, we've had discussions offline that I have concerns about making it solely for the military. I think that it can be joint use without any issue at all, but I do think it's important that whether we have a military contract at one of the FBOs or not, that whoever provides the fuel to the military has a place that they know that the military can go and they can provide that fuel. And it's not specific in my view to Havasu Air Center, and it's not to the detriment of Desert Skies. It's just that Havasu Air Center has a military contract. I believe that it's for 4 years. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes,
So for the next 4 years, they're going to have that contract. An added benefit is that if the military is routinely parking in that area, we have a great viewing place now for people to come the public to come and get an up-close personal view of that military aircraft through the glass without endangering themselves or the military aircraft. So,
I agree.
and if the military is coming in and using a flight planning area within the terminal and the restrooms, and that same public gets to interact with them. And, you know, if they've got time, I'm sure they'll take people for a walking tour around their airplane. They're always happy to show those things off, I know. So I see it as a win-win for us as the airport sponsor to provide this parking area. And the biggest thing, in my view, which is what was brought up to start with, is the safety enhancement of it.
Then it's going to, maybe alleviate some of the people that come complain on a daily basis about the military parking up toward the north end of the field and that next to some of those other hangars as well. And definitely going to address that as well.
That's one of the things I was going to add in. The pavement I know is better there that we talked about, and I agree. I think the viewing, at least in the wintertime, it'll bring a lot of people out to the airport, which brings revenue to Hangar 24 and more awareness of what we do at the airport. I think one thing we could consider is getting with a note on the chart supplement, or even as AOPA and all the other avenues out there that have the comment section or the remarks section, that there's military to the southwest corner, or however we want to phrase it, that would be helpful as well.
Sure, yeah.
And then as far as the terminal use, Damon had mentioned that to me before. I think that's anything we can do to make the military's life easier. I think that's, it's not a required responsibility, but it certainly is a responsibility as a citizen to do as much as we can. I mean, flying on a 117-degree day in Lake Havasu in a helicopter, probably not the funnest thing to do. So there's a place that they can go to cool off and use a restroom and relax from, and I think that's really helpful.
I agree. I do think that you should investigate rewriting the input to the airport services manual. I'm not sure what it's called today, but chart supplement today.
Yeah, I was thinking, if we do this and then it's all going good and we kind of realize that it's working, we want to keep it, then we'll definitely go in and we'll mark it on the AFDs and things like that, and all the publications.
Any more comments?
Just a quick question. As a non-pilot, I'm unaware of, the fueling process. So the fuel trucks possibly go from the Havasu Air Center and go down and fuel the planes where they're parked? Correct. Or okay, perfect. That clears up my question. That'll make it a lot easier, I think. Oh, and one more thing. We might want to look into tour bus parking now for the for the show of the military planes. I'm joking.
I think that long-term, looking ahead, if this goes well and the contractor's successful and we start to routinely get a lot of military airplanes in here, then we'll probably need to invite the local newspaper or get some positive publicity out there so people know when they hear an Osprey coming over their house that they can get in their car, drive out to the airport, and get a close look at them.
Sure.
Yeah, this could help put Havasu on a larger map too. Also, I think it'd be good.
Any other comments? This is set up as a presentation and doesn't allow or require any other input other than discussing it, but I would think that our discussion is certainly positive towards the ideas.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a good thing all around.
Okay, without any other comment, we'll close item 7.1. And item 8 is future discussion items. Does anybody have anything? Go ahead.
I missed one thing. I wanted to thank Damon for hosting. There was a safety event Saturday that unfortunately I got called out of town. I wasn't able to event, but I appreciate the airport for hosting it. And I heard it was very well received considering it was really hot in the summer. Good turnout. The presenter really appreciated it and wants to come back, hopefully in a little cooler weather. But wanted to make sure that he said thank you to everybody.
Very good. You're welcome. Yeah, and it had a good turnout. It was very educational. I know I learned a lot myself there.
Anything else?
Mr. Chairman, just a question. Could we get an email for events like that as board members for the airport? I'd be curious to, go out and check out things like that if we are welcome to those
Absolutely
events.
Welcome.
That would be something neat to get.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
You bet. That'd be great.
Thank you.
I have one request. I was just notified this week that there's been a change to the code that has to do with what our authority is, and as a board, And the city council passed an amendment in March. I'd like to have that put on that amendment to the code put on the agenda for next month as a discussion and possible action by this board. This board, it's important that we know what the rules that we operate under. Anything else? Future meeting is Wednesday, August 21st, and that'll be right around the Planning Action Committee meeting, and we'll talk about that again. If there's no further business, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Have a second?
I second.
Without objection, this meeting is adjourned.